Now, to kind of illustrate further how men could have enjoyed higher status than women while simultaneously having more burdensome and difficult lives, you know, actually getting the shorter end of the stick, the worst deal, all that. Let's look at an extreme case of a staunchly and severely patriarchal society, an arrangement that was relatively unheard of in hunter-gatherer cultures, the Inuit. Now, in most hunter-gatherer societies, gender roles are just as differentiated as in any traditional society. But male and female roles usually commanded similar levels of social status, respect, and admiration. This was not the case with the Inuit. But one of the really striking ways that the Inuit societies differed from other hunter-gatherer societies was that in most hunter-gatherer societies, men and women brought in roughly the same amount of food. In fact, sometimes women brought in the larger share. And they maybe didn't become dominant or have higher status than men because they didn't risk their lives to bring in the food that they brought in the way that men were expected to in the act of hunting. But the Inuit were really different from that. Not only did men bring in more than 95% of all the food, they did so at extreme risk to their lives and health, under conditions more severe than the conditions almost anywhere else on Earth. Rates of injury and premature death among Inuit men of the past were horrendous. You know, here are a bunch of guys who were expected to go out in a damn kayak in 40 below weather and chuck spears at whales 200 times their size. Or go out on treacherous ice that if you fell through it meant almost certain death to hunt seals, in order to bring home way more meat than they could possibly eat by themselves, and share that meat with the women and children who had gotten to stay home safe and sound. Now, I'm wondering what you think would have happened if you had convinced those men that their wives needed them like fish need bicycles. You know, what do you think would have happened to women as a result of that? What if you told those men that this woman and these children aren't yours, right? They don't belong to you. Therefore, you have neither the right to dictate to them nor any responsibility to take care of them. You know, what if you said that women are every bit as capable as men and they're men's equals in every single way that matters? What if you'd actually convinced men of that? Heck, what if you'd actually convinced Inuit men that women's work was just as important and prestigious as men's work? You think maybe a lot of men would have taken up sewing? You know, those Inuit men who could have, if they'd wanted to, just gone off on their own. You know, I'm just going to go off by myself, club a baby seal every month or two, and I will do just fine, since chewing pelts into fur and stitching them into clothes really isn't that hard. And, you know, I'd have plenty of free time to do that without all those extra mouths to feed. You think maybe those men would have chosen not to risk and sacrifice like Inuit men did if all they got was the same rewards and status that Inuit women did? Do you really think those men would have, or should have been expected to, risk and sacrifice the way Inuit men did for the same rewards and social status as Inuit women? You know, or would those men have said, hey, she's my equal and she's her own person and her kids don't even belong to me either. Let her get her own food. Because you know what? That's exactly what I would have said if someone had convinced me of all of that. I mean, hasn't it ever occurred to you or to any other feminist that the most extreme patriarchies occur in the harshest living conditions? Really? You know, do you think any of those Inuit women would have been better off, you know, less oppressed by being seen as equal to their men? Equal and therefore in no need of men's provision or protection. You know, you ever wonder what it might have been like to be a pregnant Inuit woman out on the ice trying to find a seal and jab a stick in it so she could eat? You ever think that maybe, just maybe, she might have been perfectly happy trading something valuable in order to secure the cooperation and support that imposed such hideous costs and risks onto him? You ever think that maybe her survival in that environment was so dependent on him risking life and limb every time he went out, that she might have actually thought social status and personal autonomy were really small prices to pay in exchange for what it cost him to give her what she needed. You ever think that maybe marriage wasn't a way to force women to become slaves to men? Bear men's children and provide them with free domestic services the way so many second-wave feminists have portrayed it. But maybe it was a way to force men to become slaves to women, to support women's children and provide provisioning and protection services to women? You ever wonder, just maybe, it was both? Oh my God, I just blew my own mind. You never stop to wonder why the very idea of feminism only occurred to women when economic, political, and technological development finally meant that trading places with men would mean trading up instead of down. That idea, that whole concept, probably goes a long way toward explaining why feminism originated among the wealthiest and most privileged women first. Don't you think? I mean, even Mary Wollstonecraft was honest enough to call women's privilege exactly that in her claims that it should be eliminated. And I just don't get why she wasn't more popular among the working class women who depended on that privilege for their survival. And I know the whole thing sounds so cold and uncivilized. Those Inuit men should have been willing to harpoon whales from a kayak and share the meat with women and children and give their lives to protect women and children without any expectation of extra anything, right? They should have been willing to do that just because. For nothing. That would have been fair, right? That would have been fair to everyone. It was oppression. It was oppression of women that men in Inuit societies were granted higher social status, more respect, and a few extra rights in exchange for doing a ton of really difficult shit that they didn't need to do for themselves, but did anyway because women and children needed them to. And it was really unfair that women weren't given power in those societies because, hey, the one who doesn't have to risk anything, and the one who doesn't have to pay anything, and the one who doesn't have to go out on the ice should have an equal say on all the decisions that affect everybody in the community. And I think it's perhaps that feminist framing, right? The duty of a man to share his labor with women, to put himself between danger and women, to risk and pay for the benefit of women during a history where the risks and burdens of doing that were so very high, which is why women couldn't be expected to bear them. That's oppression of women simply because men weren't willing to do it for nothing. I think that was the first red flag I had that feminism is based on sexism and hate. Because you kind of have to hate someone if you're going to tell him that his kind have oppressed women all through history by doing what was necessary, including dying, to keep women safe, sheltered, and fed. You kind of have to hate someone to claim that the old system only existed to benefit men at the expense of women's enslavement, when that system is the only reason that women are still around. That women are not like the bonobos in the trees. And it's definitely hate to say that women were not complicit in this system, that they take no responsibility for things working the way they did. But feminists do this all the time. Like Hillary Clinton once said, and yeah, I'm going to paraphrase her, men have never been the primary victims of their own deaths in war. It's the women who are still alive and have to raise the kids alone who are the primary victims of men's deaths. If I claimed that a woman's husband was the primary victim of her death because he's left alive to look after the children alone, you'd call me a misogynist, and you'd be right. And I know it's not the same, because women have always had the shorter end of the stick, right? They've only gotten out of society what they were required to put into it, and that meant they got less, and that's unfair. That verse in the Bible The one about women being obedient to their husbands if they wanted to stay on the right side of the man upstairs. That was unfair gender roles. But the several verses that admonished men that they were 100% responsible for the survival of their wives, their children, their widowed mothers, their unmarried sisters, and any other extended family members who couldn't be self-sufficient if he wanted God to approve of him, no! None of that was unfair. None of that was gender biased. The Bible was only unfair to women. All men got was power, right? Just power. Cookies for having a penis. No other qualifications required. You know, for 3 years, I was the only thing keeping myself and 3 children alive and fed and with a roof over our heads and all of that. And it fucking sucks. Even now, even today, even in this easy fucking world, it fucking sucks. It would have sucked even more if this was still an era of manual labor and zero workplace standards, the way things were when men were expected to take on the burden of providing for women and children under the evil patriarchy